Good evening, everyone. It is just about 7 o'clock on this evening, this Wednesday evening, and we're super excited to have you here for part three of our four-part Landmark Learns webinar series, all on executive function. And about 2 months ago, I hosted our kickoff, which was our primer session. And I'm really happy to be back again this evening hosting this third in a four-part series. Ann Andrews will be presenting tonight. She's the great mom of three children with dyslexia. Um, Little housekeeping as we get started this evening. I want to remind all attendees that you will receive a recording of tonight's presentation, and all of the resources that are referenced within the next 24 hours. And we're going to reserve about 10 to 15 minutes at the end tonight. So at around 7:45, 7:50, depending upon our pacing, we'll open it up for questions. And we ask that people use the Q&A feature to do those questions. So if questions pop up as Ann is presenting tonight, feel free to just drop those in the Q&A. I will collect those and then I will prepare those for Ann to answer at the end of her presentation. Little bit about Landmark School itself. We began in 1971 and have been a leader in supporting students with dyslexia and other language-based learning disabilities or differences since then. We like to say that we celebrate dyslexic thinking, and our students leave here prepared for an ever-changing and interconnected world that's changing super fast. Again, since the 1970s, we, Landmark Outreach, which is part of Landmark School, has been working to support students who cannot come to Landmark School itself. And that's one of my primary roles here at Landmark, is that I'm currently consulting to public schools, helping them do the best work they can to support students with language-based learning disabilities as well. And then our last Landmark Learns webinar for this year will happen on April 9th, also a Wednesday evening. And the topic for that presentation will be executive function at school. That presenter will be Rachel Casola. She's currently a Landmark High School faculty member and director of our Summer Skills Plus executive function workshops for both middle and high school students who might be attending traditional public school setting or even private school settings, who want to spend some time this summer really building those executive function skills in order to be really well prepared when September 1 starts in the fall, and just get ready for a great academic year. I think that's our housekeeping for tonight. So with that, I'm going to pass the torch over to Ann and let her introduce herself. And we'll hope that my Wi-Fi connection is stable for the next hour. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Adam. Hi, everybody. My name's Ann Andrew. I'm a veteran Landmark teacher. I guess I can say that if I've been here 8 years. So at Landmark, I learned a lot about teaching executive functioning skills across all subject areas. And I've also been kind of very focused in this work for personal reasons, for as a parent to try to help my own children. I have read some amazing books that I'll share with you, and I'm like addicted to several podcasts, which we'll also share in the in what we send out at the end of the presentation. I'm especially excited about Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, if you haven't read that one yet. I also love Jessica Lahey's The Gift of Failure. I read it, no, I read it years ago. I heard her give a presentation and I left feeling very offended because, my kids were really struggling in school, and how dare she talk about failure being a gift? My kids knew failure all too well. Then after reading The Anxious Generation, I reread her book, and I have new appreciation for what she tells us in that book. I also love Lynn Meltzer, who's an executive functioning expert here in Massachusetts. And I really because executive function can, self-regulation is such a big issue with kids who struggle with executive functioning. Lynn Lyons has become kind of a go-to for me. So I follow Lynn Lyons' work as well. So as I said, I'm a mom to three. They're now young adults who have dyslexia and executive functioning challenges. And I'm standing here before you having made a ton of mistakes as a parent. Um, One thing I'm really proud of is the advocacy work I did for my children when they needed me. I was very involved in getting them their IEPs and making sure their IEPs were maintained. So I wouldn't change that at all. I think that they need us in those, especially in those early years. But some of the mistakes I made, some of you might be able to relate to, Velcro sneakers until they were like 10. Um, Sideline chats with their coaches saying, Johnny has trouble with his left and his right. Help doing their homework or doing their homework for them, and even like overstepping in their friendships. So some things I'm really not proud of, but as parents, we will do anything we can to protect our kids. We're biologically wired to do that. We want to ease their struggles and intervene so that they don't feel distress. And so while there's a lot I couldn't or can't change or wouldn't change, I'll speak as a parent that wishes I knew then what I know today. So if I sound preachy at all during any of this presentation, please know that I've made every mistake possible with over-accommodating my own kids. And I just want to share what I've learned with the hope that I can help you all here tonight. So the agenda today will be, I'll probably be referring to executive functioning skills as EF because it's just too much of a mouthful. It is, as we know, the invisible engine that drives our planning, our organization, and our self-regulation, which is really a big one. Delays in EF, they hinder our ability to regulate our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. So the focus tonight will be a lot on elementary and middle school students. We'll touch on a little bit of young adult transitions and how these skills evolve over time. There's not enough time to get into any kind of assistive technology, although I do recognize there's a place for it, especially in high school. So we're going to talk about why executive functioning skills matter, how they develop over time, some common challenges. We're going to talk about executive functioning through the lens of Hill, skill, and will. And then I sort of organized the presentation based on the landmark teaching principles, our 6 principles, and this is the home version. We're going to talk a lot about guided questioning and the importance of guided questioning to develop executive functioning skills and build more of a team, like have parents in a coaching role. Then we're going to close with risk-taking and resilience and the harm of over-accommodating, and then have some Q&A if I talk fast. So why executive functioning skills matter. So at its core, executive functioning is really just about getting things done. But to do that, we have to manage our thoughts, emotions, and our actions. So our kids with these challenges are dealing with a neurobiological phenomenon that fundamentally inhibits their ability to self-regulate. So even high-performing students benefit from explicit instruction in executive functioning skills because we're not born with these skills. They're not innate. I also want to mention that improving skills isn't just about academics. It will build resilience, self-regulation, and an overall ability to navigate everyday challenges. So whereas we agree, I think, that education is about launching our kids into independent, meaningful lives, so much more than just earning good grades. But if a child struggles with internally with managing stress and organizing materials, their whole lives suffer. Their real world performance suffers. So I just want to stress the importance of a partnership between home and school, because I think that can really, really make a difference if we can have more connection between parents and teachers to help shift the focus from grades to lifelong learning skills, lifelong skills. Okay, so leading cognitive neuroscientists show that executive functioning skills predict academic success more than IQ. Kind of a mind-blowing statement, but this research was conducted by a couple of different leading experts. Dr. Adele Diamond shows that EF skills predict academic success even more so than early math or reading skills. And another, Dr. John Hattie, he's an education researcher, reviewed 50,000 studies with 250 million students, and he found that ADHD, which is a form of EF difficulty, it's among the most significant negative predictor of school success. So failure to address executive functioning, especially for students with ADHD, can lead to the greatest negative impact on school achievement. And when students develop the skills, they do better across all subject matters, across all disciplines. So this is sort of like a wink and a nod to the importance of us including executive functioning and skill development and as a part of every school's curriculum in some capacity, as early as elementary school, in my humble opinion. Um, Okay, so this graph shows how these skills develop over time. And this model represents what we refer to in education as the gradual release of responsibility. So it's the small hill is the I do, we get to the we do, and then the you do. So basically what this means is at home, so at school, what this might look like is a student goes up to a student is taught a new math concept and the teacher models it several times at the board. She works with the student individually. And then they move to the we do stage where your students will be up at the board and they'll be working on it together or in a team with some intervention as needed. And then we hope that eventually, they're doing it on their own. So at home, we can do the same. It's all about the parent modeling the task, practicing the task in the we do stage, and then the you do, the child will take ownership with occasional support as needed. Importantly, something to think about is the key growth spurts when it comes to executive functioning. So ages 2 to 5 is when there's like the rapid and early development of impulse control and basic problem solving when they're really little. And then the middle schoolers, ages 11 to 13, have significant growth in self-regulation and decision-making. This is when our brains are really working hard to start to develop these skills. But, which if you've attended any of these other Landmark Learns presentations, we know that full executive functioning maturity does not, we're not mature until our mid to late 20s. And even it gets scarier. Dr. Russell Barkley, who's an expert in ADHD, says that individuals with ADHD experience a 30% delay in these EF skills, and that they may function 2 years behind their peers in areas like time management, organization, emotional regulation, and just basic good decision making. I also read, and I'm almost afraid to read this out loud, but one person I follow said that for kids with or people with ADHD or a significant impairment in executive functioning, we may not fully mature until our early to mid 30s. So yeah, check with me in about 8 to 10 years, see how I'm doing. Again, I want to stress that explicit instruction, lots of structure and support at home are critical for developing these skills. Am I going too fast? No, I'm okay. Okay. All right. Um, so we're going to get into a little bit of the social emotional side of executive functioning. So this slide states executive functioning challenges are the single greatest negative factor impacting school achievement, often leading to higher anxiety levels due to difficulty managing expectations and tasks. This, when children feel like they can't meet our expectations, they're going to be frustrated. They may become aggressive or withdraw, but definitely they're feeling overwhelmed. Yet, you might have heard, or I hope your child has never heard or been told that they're lazy. In reality, they just have a lack of skill. It's a skill deficit, not a lack of effort. And I just want to note here also that internal triggers like anxiety and shame are really sometimes even more damaging than the external distractions that we often connect with inattention and ADHD. So when we talk about emotional regulation, this is the hidden barrier behind all of our executive functions. When you experience this high anxiety, it will block any kind of executive function skills that you're trying to access. You can't learn when you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Um, I think um, what kids might do is they set up these emotional barriers to protect themselves from these feelings of shame. Um, Fear of setting high goals due to potential failure might lead them to pick an easier science project or to avoid a task. They may, to protect themselves, they might avoid feedback because it's emotionally distressing. So they might not be checking their test scores, or they might be afraid to go discuss something or negotiate something with their teachers. So this internalized shame from chronic executive functioning is real. It follows our kids around from the moment they wake up to when they go to bed. There's a lot of negative self-doubt talk, and with that come a lot of big emotions, and we know they already have a hard time regulating their emotions. So our kids might come home, they're going to have meltdowns, they might be argumentative. In my case, I always tried to make things really nice when they got home. What that sometimes led to through my love, but regrettably, were lowering expectations at home because I just wanted to keep things nice for them. Okay, so common executive functioning challenges in elementary and middle school. You know all these, but task initiation and procrastination. So at home, they're avoiding starting their chores, their homework, or they're struggling with transitions like going to bed. And at school, what we see might be struggles to begin assignments without teacher prompting. The second one is time management and basically time awareness. Sometimes it's referred to as time blindness. So at home, they might be running late. They underestimate how much time they need to get things done. And at school, they might have trouble with pacing on assignments, forget due dates, and rush through work. Um, Third is organization of materials. So at home, these kids lose their belongings. One shoe's in the kitchen and the other's in the laundry room. They can't find their homework or their lunchbox. Their room is messy. They can't find their backpack. And at school, they might have disorganized binders. Everything's in the front pocket. They forget their supplies, or they misplace assignments. The fourth is impulse control and emotional regulation. So at home, they might react impulsively. They might overreact to small frustrations. And at school, they're going to be blurting out answers or interrupting. They might have trouble with turn taking and difficulty handling feedback or mistakes. Number five, flexible thinking and problem solving. So again, at home, they don't like it when routines change. They might resist new approaches, or they get stuck on one way of doing things. And at school, they would struggle with unexpected schedule changes or become frustrated learning a new concept or trouble working in groups. And number six, self-monitoring and follow through. So at home, they might not be checking their work, they're rushing through chores or leaving tasks unfinished. Um, you know, Inevitably someone said they're going to empty the dishwasher and like 50% of it is still in there. At school, they might turn in incomplete assignments, forget to review work, or they're unaware of mistakes until teachers need to point them out. And next, we're going to talk about the concept of hill, skill, and will. And this is a model for understanding the development of executive functioning. It came from Dr. Lynn Meltzer's book, Executive Function in Education, and the chapter's written or co-authored, I think, by Howard Gardner. And it frames executive functioning development through three conditions. So the first is the hill, and that's the goal. Important to set a clear objective. Kids struggle sometimes to define clear, achievable goals, and we're going to get into that a little bit more goal setting when we get to another slide. Some cognitive barriers to setting goals is basically like lack of practice or knowledge of what is an effective goal, lack of involvement maybe in their setting their goals in their IEPs or being aware of what their goals are. Or they might be setting vague objectives for themselves, like I'll do better, on the next test instead of like a clear objective such as like I'll increase my score by 10 points. So having very specific SMART goals. So it's our job, like teachers and parents maybe, to teach goal setting. We do it at school, at Landmark, and you can help us support it at home by, following the model of how to teach smart, realistic, achievable goals with our kids. And in the middle is the skill, and this is really just the ability and strategies that they have to achieve goals. So knowing the goal isn't enough. They need to have the skill in order to be able to have a chance at achieving the goal. Some barriers that get in the way in their thinking, just lacking skills and strategies to complete the task. If your kid comes home with a math assignment and they just simply don't know how to do it, how could they possibly achieve the goal of completing the homework? So they also have difficulties often organizing materials, prioritizing tasks, and following these multi-step directions, and that impacts the skill that they can put in. So again, we at Landmark, we involve them in the IEP process, and they, at Landmark again, we do have a study skills department. So all of Landmark students have good, solid teaching across the curriculum and executive functioning skills. I'll just put this out there. When my kids were in public school, we added an executive functioning goal, and that's not unheard of. I think it's something that you can think of and talk to your team about if that's something, if you're a public school parent. Study skills, organization, how to break down tasks. That would be helpful. And then finally, the will. So that's our persisting when it gets tough. So some barriers to will, it's not laziness, it's not knowing how to adjust strategies or not having the right strategies or repeating ineffective study habits instead of trying new approaches or struggling with or, having a plan B, having these alternative strategies when faced with a setback is really important. Having multiple ways to solve, to reach a goal. And so that's, again, I keep referring to Landmark, but it's, giving students different strategies in order to achieve their goals is something that at home too, we can definitely there are lots of different ways to achieve goals, and we have to be creative as their parents to put forth some ideas specific to your scenarios. So the key takeaway here is kids with EF challenges do not lack the will. They face this developmental challenge tied to their brain maturation. They're just not there yet. And it isn't about pushing willpower. It's about teaching strategies, fostering resilience, and creating an environment where kids can develop these skills over time. All right, so we're getting into the 6 Landmark teaching strategies that have been modified for home use. Ooh, is it 38 minutes? Are we really at 38 minutes? No, we're okay, 7:25. So we want to empower our kids through success, empower them through success. So we want to celebrate small wins and create opportunities for confidence. So when kids succeed at tasks that match their abilities, they develop the belief that they can handle future challenges. Confidence grows through experience of success. So as parents, we can choose tasks that are aligned with our kids' current abilities. And importantly, we want to increase the complexity as the skills improve. So there's always the just right challenge. It might be setting the table, doing laundry, meal prep, depending on your child's age. And then older kids especially can deal with real world problem solving. Let them order the food, let them pick up the phone and order the food for takeout. Importantly, help them figure out ways to ask for help when they need it, whether at school or elsewhere. Another thing I'm super passionate about is self-advocacy. So we need to teach kids to communicate their needs while providing guidance and modeling. So this is, involving them in the IEP process as soon as possible is really big. We can do role playing with them. It's important that they see and hear you and advocate on their behalf. And as soon as possible, Massachusetts says the year they turn 14, but you can push for sooner if you want, have them attend their IEP meeting, even just to listen to some of it so that they can begin to understand um, what advocacy looks like and hear adults model advocacy. Other things we can do, and I talked about that a second ago, was, open an email together and model how to ask a teacher a question. I love sentence starters. We do a lot with sentence starters at the middle school and elementary school. So it's, hi, Mrs. Andrew, I'm struggling with blank. Could you help clarify? Or I reread the directions, but I'm still a little confused. So teaching them how to speak up for themselves to their teachers is a really safe place to start. Um, but we won't expect complete independence yet. We have to scaffold the skills and faith support over time. Um, One last thing on empowering our kids through success. There's a lot of talk out there about having we want to praise our kids for the good job that they do, but it's important to be as specific as possible and genuine. So instead of, well, I don't have an instead of, I'm just going to give you my example. You organized your backpack so well, everything has its place. Or I noticed you handled that phone call really well. You were clear and polite. So being very specific and finding genuine opportunities when they really do shine, and to be as specific as possible. They're listening to us. And this will strengthen their belief that, their effort will lead to their improvement. Okay, principle number 2, engaging the senses. This all comes down to multisensory instruction. So at Landmark, we're all about multisensory. You see kids, hopping math facts in the playground and up and about always. So and this is so that we can hit all of our different, everybody processes in a different way. So we want to make sure that we hit all of our students through multisensory means. Often our kids might have stronger visual working memory than language working memory. So it's important to have a variety of multisensory tools. This example shows a countdown timer, which is great. That's available on Amazon, and that visually shows time counting down. So if they work for 20 minutes, you set it for 20 and the red will start to become smaller as it ticks down to 0. The other example here is just a cursive chart, and on the far right is Sarah Ward, who's an executive function coach and expert, has models the concept of ready, do, done, where students have a clear, organized workspace, and they have the work that they're working on is on the yellow square. That's just construction paper. Then when they're working on it, it moves to green, and when it's done, it moves on to the red. It's just a great way for them to feel like it's almost like checking things off. Once that yellow pile goes away, you feel good. So again, I just want to stress that it's important that the space that they work in, while I'm saying engage all the senses, it's important that we don't overstimulate by having them work in a loud kitchen, obviously. So it's good that they have an intentional space for studying that's not overstimulating. Big fan of phones being far, far away. And we're not going to get into that today, but that's really important. Give them a calculator if they need a calculator. Other multi-sensory methods like chore charts and color-coded schedules and visual checklists are all really helpful. This is also a point that I can talk about. Timers and timers are really key. The one I mentioned here doesn't work this way, but any kind of timer will teach time awareness. So they might think a project is going to take them 5 minutes. You set the timer for 5 minutes and time it. They realize they still, they underestimated how much time it took. So I love alarms. Alarms are always going off at my house. Waking up, I said, taking a shower, getting out the door, timers are going off all the time. It's also fun to set a timer to challenge yourself or your child to complete a task in that predetermined amount of time. It just makes it fun and turns a chore possibly into a little bit of a game. Print-rich environments, we talked about that a little bit. I already talked about that. And the only other thing I'll say, because it is technically related to engaging the senses, is the importance of verbal rehearsal for working memory. So at Landmark, with many children, we ask them to repeat the instructions back to us or teach back a concept to reinforce understanding. And that can also be done at home. Just give them directions, and it's totally fair game to ask them to repeat them back to make sure that they understood. Bins and folders, keep, colorful bins, folders, binders, color coding is great. And I think I'm going to move on to the next slide. It's a lot there. Okay, time management. So this is an example of what's known as the ideal week. So again, someone I follow talks about this concept of an ideal week. And you can sort of see, I think, how it's all blocked off so that kids can visually see their time move. And we can move from, they can plan ahead instead of scrambling at the last minute. It creates this visual blueprint for them. So seeing their time mapped out, balancing their social life, their school, their fun time, their personal well-being, their sports, it's all mapped out and color-coded. And this really engages that nonverbal working memory, which is a key executive functioning skill. And it also encourages self-reflection. So you can refer back to the time, this ideal week that you created the week before, and you'll see patterns and you can adjust habits along the way. So importantly, I think I talked a little bit about to color. It's important the first thing that we need to do is really categorize activities that are important for our well-being. This one doesn't show it, but everything from sleep to eating meals to movement and me time, all these things take up huge chunks of our time. And it's really kind of cool when you can map out a 24-hour period and see how much time you really have to devote to your schoolwork. I like to practice, I talked about with a weekly review, and this is that concept of estimating the actual, your estimate versus the actual, how much time you planned to do something versus what it came in, because often we misjudge the time spent on tasks. So I think that's going to be that for that one. It's just that, yeah, I'm going to move on to the next one. Breaking it down for big wins. So this comes down to what Landmark refers to as like microtasking, chunking. So this is breaking big tasks into smaller concrete steps. And it just makes everything more manageable, less intimidating. And we need to scaffold everything to all these tasks by providing clear, achievable steps, and that will build confidence and success. So at home, this might look like, instead of saying, go clean your room, we need to be mindful of working memory challenges. So it might be better, we might get a better result if we start by giving one instruction at a time. And again, we can ask our child to repeat those directions back to us to make sure we know they've heard and understood, reducing the chance of a misstep. And this is also an opportunity. We're going to talk about guided questioning, but this gives if your child just doesn't know where to begin, we can guide them by asking a question like, well, what's the first step you can take when it comes to cleaning your room? Like maybe you want to fix the fitted sheet, put on your flat sheet, adjust the pillows, just really being explicit in our expectations on what it looks like. And then once they are successful and they gain confidence, we can add the second step and then the third. I love also in this model providing a visual cue, a visual reminder of what a finished room looks like. So take a picture of that gorgeous room, put that on their cork board so that they won't need you so much the next time around. They can refer back to that visual image of what the expectation is. Keeping in mind that some kids might need some verbal prompting or maybe some physical assistance to start. So we model that first step and then let them complete the rest. For time's sake, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So, yeah. Repetition builds mastery. So this is the power of practice. This is where, in landmark teaching, we are always circling back to skills and having them practice until automaticity sets in. Similar to, we can always compare this to like athlete, their favorite musician, that the practice and the repetition is super important. They train consistently until their skills become automatic, and executive functioning skills develop in the same way. So we need to be consistent because consistency creates habits. So having a consistent homework routine, it will really reduce anxiety around the process. And here at Landmark, our kids love routine. And then we talked about this a little bit already, the gradual release of responsibility. Um, so here, the example of packing a backpack each night, once they get into the habit, step one, we help them pack the backpack. Step two, um, we we no step one would be we would pack it for them with them watching, I hope, and then they would begin to pack it, and then eventually, again, that visual checklist would be great, and then they reach full independence. The more they practice, the more automatic these skills become. This slide, less talking, more doing, gets into kind of like modeling. So our kids are watching everything we do. So I don't know who to credit this quote to, but I love it. It says, children are born with these invisible antennae, constantly scanning for hypocrisy. So they are watching us. And if we, tell them to put their phones away and ours is, in our hand, they're watching and they are surely going to call us out on it. Dr. Ross Green is a psychologist and an expert in EF challenges. And he says that watching adults tackle problems is one of the strongest ways kids develop these skills. So for modeling, we can model how we regulate our emotions during a difficult time versus reacting, how we behave when we get cut off. It's showing our planning systems, how we sort of organize our homes and what systems we use and tools we use, keeping our planners and our calendar visible for them to see, keeping our homes organized, less clutter. I'm working on that one. And then importantly, we need to communicate our expectations calmly and assertively. So when we do need to use our voice, I mean, our modeling can be verbal or nonverbal, but when we raise our voice or nag or argue, which I'm sure we're all guilty of, I'm guilty of, but it's shown that reinforces anxiety in our kids. So we try to stay calm, solution focused. We try our breathing techniques and try to use neutral observational language. I love I noticed or I wonder statements. Also, like just talking, like thinking out loud and normalizing our mistakes. So you can say something like, when I'm stuck, I start with something small and then I build momentum. That's how I move forward. Or, oh my God, I forgot that list again. Next time I'm going to take a picture. Just showing our mistakes and being human. It goes a long way. I know that from my middle school students. And we also want to keep our language simple and concrete because our kids need time to process. I was just referring to Dr. Green. He authored this concept called collaborative problem solving. And it's kind of like psychology based, but I really think it kind of tied in nicely with how we can relate to our kids and become a sort of a coach with our kids. Um, this, and I'm going to get into the steps, but it's basically asking us to treat problem solving as a team effort, coaching our kids to identify and anticipate obstacles and develop planning, organization, self-regulation. And it will really encourage self-awareness and flexible thinking. That's the end goal. And the end goal is autonomy. So I'm going to fly through the steps and just give you like a couple of examples. There are 6 steps to the CPS model. First is identify the problem. So if you notice, brushing teeth upstairs is slowing down the whole morning routine, like you're yelling upstairs and nobody can hear you. So we want to use neutral language, and we can say something like, I noticed that this brushing teeth upstairs thing is slowing us down. And then we want to understand the child's perspective and ask open-ended, guided questions. Like, what do you think would help? Asking, getting them involved. And then we're going to express our concerns, why the issue matters. That's obvious. It's hard for us to start the day with me nagging you. I don't like this. It's not a good way to start. And then step number 4, sorry, that was express your concerns. Number 3. Number 4, brainstorm solutions together. What do you think would help? Pause, long wait time, wait, see if they come up with something. And then your idea is great because you're going to say, what if we move the toothbrush to the downstairs bathroom? And then problem solved. You agree to the plan, that's step number 5. And step number 6 is you follow up and adjust as needed. So it's really about connecting with our kids, clarifying the problem, co-designing a plan, and then trying to see what works, and then reflecting. I think this might be part of the handout as well. Um, so we want to foster ownership and engagement. Yes, this is our final of the 6 landmark teaching principles for home. So this is all about involving our kids, including our kids. At Landmark, we call it like student inclusion, but we really want to give our kids a say because they're more invested if they can help shape their own routines and systems. And it really promotes autonomy, this buy-in, and long-term engagement. So we can collaborate. This is where I'm going to talk a little bit about goals. We can help them collaborate. We can collaborate with them on setting goals and routines. Middle schoolers especially really need to learn how to self-monitor and take on more responsibility. So we need to help them set clear, realistic goals with checkpoints along the way. And I love this visual because we don't walk away. We're never walking away. We're just stepping back as much as we can. And ideally, by the way, these goals should be connected to tasks that interest them and or have long-term benefits. So instead of, I'll do better on my math test, help them get more specific, say by saying like, okay, I'll study 15 minutes each night before Friday's test. This also, fostering engagement, gets into empowering their choice and helping them personalize their systems. So maybe we let them design their own homework planner. Maybe we try it. Maybe we let them choose where and when they do their homework with reasonable guardrails. Um, Maybe they want to have a study buddy or join a homework club if they feel that would help. So we want to involve them in this entire process. Um, and then finally, encouraging self-reflection and developing metacognition, our thinking about our thinking. So we want to help our kids assess what's working and what's not. And there are targeted questions that can help with this. And we're going to get into guided questionings after this break, if we still have time for a break.
And that was so great. Thank you. As we just pause for a second to reflect on what you said. Um, I think we are going to move into the guided questioning piece. We have a number of questions that audience members have asked uh, you, and I can certainly support you in answering some of those from the perspective of working in some school districts. But I really appreciate so far the way that you've emphasized the partnership opportunity between what schools are doing and what we can do in the home setting as well. Because I think it mirror matches what you were saying earlier about the predictability that is necessary and the consistency. And if we can align those two settings in a consistent, predictable way, I could see students and children, right? Because they're children when they're at home, really appreciating that alignment. Um, Great. So, Anne, why don't you move on to the guided questions?
Okay.
Um, and then we'll save a couple minutes, about 10 minutes, to just talk through some of these questions that came in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
Oops. Let's see. All right. So this is guided questioning, and I came across this. My dear friend Wendy Ellis, who I think might be here on this call, is a speech and language pathologist at EMS, and I saw a presentation that she did about guided questioning, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And I just took her model and tried to tie in how guided questioning can help with EF skills at home, what parents can do. So, we have to practice putting things into our own words, knowing why those words matter, and seeing how they connect to things. So we can ask our kids why questions and how questions, and then eventually they'll be able to, be able to do that on their own. They'll be able to sub-vocalize. I envision a kid sort of saying, sub-vocalizing that eventually. That would be great. But these guided questions help them make connections between ideas. They encourage higher level critical thinking skills, planning, self-monitoring, and they really help with self-advocacy. Um, I mentioned Lynn Lyons earlier, and I listened to a recent podcast she did on the importance of asking how questions. So instead of like, why are you upset? Try, how can we handle this? Um, I think it's an activating problem solving word, that word how. And I think that's in the next slide, there are a lot of how questions. I tried to throw a bunch in there. The other thing we can do is in addition to how questions, to have them begin to visualize finished products and future directions. So, for example, how will you feel when you are done? Or can you visualize the finished product so that they can begin to sort of visualize and really think about what it means to be done or how you're going to feel when you're done. I think that those are great questions we can ask our kids. One thing that I've always struggled with, and I'm getting a little bit better, I'm definitely better at as a teacher, but at home I still struggle, is this concept of a wait time. So after you ask your guided question of your child, it's really important to um, pause and listen before responding to their answer. It will reduce pressure, and our kids will be more likely to give us good answers when we pause and listen. It's hard. That's a big skill to learn. So we want to let kids solve their problems and step in only when needed, and that's where these questions come into play. So what you see are types of guided questions and how to use them. What I see in my speaker notes are 5 key categories of guided questions. Um, Everything from planning and anticipation to self-talk or internal speech, emotional control, reflection or looking back on successes and setbacks, and inhibition. Um, Pausing to consider actions and consequences. I'm just going to read one example from each so you can sort of see how they work. So for planning and anticipation, again, this goes back to visualizing the steps before starting. We could ask, how can we make mornings easier? Or how do you decide what to do first when you have a lot to complete? To help them plan. For self-talk or internal speak, we need to strengthen that inner dialogue of problem solving. So how do you feel when you take a risk and try something new? Or how can you remind yourself to stay on track? For emotional control, um, how can we handle it if things don't go as planned? Or how will you know when it's time to take a break? For reflecting, looking back on successes and setbacks, how did you handle that stressful moment? What worked well? How can you respond differently next time if you feel the same way? Or how do you feel after pushing through that hard thing? And then for inhibition, um, how do you think someone else would feel if you fill in the blank? Or, how do you know when you're focused? What helps you stay that way? So again, you'll be getting I think, a printable handout of these. Personally, I'm going to put it on the inside cabinet of my kitchen. So when I'm stuck with what to say, I'm going to refer to it. Okay, so our goal with all of this is building resilient, independent thinkers. Um, and, in order to be a resilient, independent thinker, you need to take risks. And, everyday calculated risks that our kids take are speaking in class discussions. That can be really hard. Presenting to a group, trying a challenging coursework, exploring new extracurriculars, asking for help. Those are all really hard things that our kids need to manage every day. Um, so we want to, our goal as parents and teachers is to find the just right challenge. We want to stretch their abilities while making sure they feel capable and supported, um, and encouraging independence early and often, and letting them take those small risks to prepare them for bigger challenges later on. The next couple slides are going to get into this more, but the hard thing, it's really hard for me and it's going to be hard for you too, is allowing natural consequences to teach problem solving and self-reliance. So that, delivering the forgotten homework every time, guilty of that, that's reinforcing dependence. They know that we're just going to, show up and turn it in. But rather, we need to try to let them experience that late assignment, and that will teach responsibility. I love this quote. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I know he wrote the book called The Self-Driven Child. William Stixrud, Adam, maybe you can help me. But his quote says, when parents deprive kids of a sense of control, children are in a lose-lose situation. Kids can feel that if they succeed, it was because of their parents. And if they fail, it was because of themselves. So that really hit me hard. Um, we want to scaffold support. We want to not remove challenges, and that will, help kids become resilient, independent thinkers. A couple more quotes because I go quote crazy. This is Jonathan Haidt. I think this one's from Coddling of the American Mind. There's a lot parents can do to become better gardeners. Those who create a space in which their children can learn and grow, in contrast to carpenters who try to mold and shape their children directly. So that's a little rough. It's a little harsh. That's none of us. But I love the idea of letting them grow like a garden. There's another metaphor I heard recently. Um, Let me try this on. I don't know how I'm going to do, but, and again, landmarks. So we're all about lighthouses, but we parents are the lighthouse. Visualize us, we're the lighthouse. We're on this strong, rocky coast. And importantly, our kids are in the boat out in the water. And importantly, we are staying on the shore, providing guidance and light. And our kids are in the boat out in the water, navigating on their own and steering their own course. Really love that. Um, all right. And then this one. So the harm of over accommodating. This I think this is everything. So, kids do well when parents put boundaries in place that encourage the adoption of skills necessary for overcoming challenges. Um, so, I just want to note that, like in school, we have your kids on IEPs are often they have accommodations, and they're meant to. Most of those accommodations are meant to be temporary, and we remove them as students begin to internalize the skill. Um, you know, not all accommodations are temporary, but my son had accommodations in college for extra time. But the goal is really to gradually reduce the accommodations for kids so that they can be independent. They learn the skill and it's automatic. And I think we can connect that to home too. We can definitely, eventually I did stop tying my kids' shoes, so it does work. Um, Another quote I love, sorry. Children, this is Jonathan Haidt again. Children are by nature anti-fragile. Just as the immune system gets stronger by exposure to germs and trees get stronger by exposure to wind, children require exposure to setbacks, failures, shocks, and stumbles to develop strength and self-reliance. Overprotection interferes with this development and renders them more likely to be fragile and anxious as adults. Um, so, when we over accommodate, we unintentionally teach kids this modified version of learned helplessness. Really, it's not pure learned helplessness, Adam, right? But we're teaching them that they believe they're powerless to change the situation. Instead of empowering them, we risk unintentionally. We send the message, I don't think you're competent enough to do this yourself. And this is what kills me because I think that that's how my boys have felt. Definitely. As young adults, they've told me that. So, one last thing, Jessica Leahy's advice, stop Take a breath, ask yourself, are there skills here that are important to be learned? And if I take over, will I deprive my kids of this life experience? Boom. Okay.
Oh,
All right.
thank you so much. I have to just say, I think the thread that will run through many of the questions and the answers that we'll provide go back to the guided questioning that you brought up at the end of tonight's presentation. And
Okay.
I want to encourage people who are on tonight's webinar and those who are going to wait and watch the recorded version to also access those resources that we'll be sending out that include those because the frequency at which we ask those questions are really allowing us to activate the child's voice and to break that cycle of biasness where when we do it for them, they start doubting their own ability to do it themselves. And so I think the power of that guided questioning really cannot be overstated. So I'm just being mindful of time, and we've gone over, but our attendance is still quite high, so I think that was okay. And thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
doing this for us this evening. I really enjoyed the presentation, and I'm sure the participants on the webinar did as well. I want to remind everybody that in about 24 hours, we'll send out the link to tonight's webinar, and we'll send out a document with a link to all the resources. And again, please put the April date for our fourth and final Landmark Learns on your calendars. And again, that was the 9th of April. And it's the same time. We'll start at 7 p.m. and go for about an hour. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you listening to us this evening.
Good night.